So this is actually a pretty fun gospel to unpack a little bit. You are the salt of the earth. But if salt loses its flavor, with what can it be seasoned? So right off the bat, just got to get a disclaimer out there. There is some bias involved. I am a total salt junkie. Salty foods are just the best. So, the advice that Jesus gives here, well, it can in fact be taken literally. If food is bland, it can be seasoned with herbs and spices. For instance, plain chicken by itself is actually, a pretty boring thing. And no one cares. Because when we cook chicken, we cook it with other ingredients and flavors that add to that base component of chicken meat. This was even true in Africa, where you might assume that they don't have too many other ingredients to work with. Not the case. Chicken over there was fantastic every time. That was your celebratory meal. If you were celebrating a birthday or whatever, chicken was on the menu. And it was very often grilled with oil, a little bit of vinegar, salt and pepper, and a habanero pepper sauce. And I loved it every single time. And I can hear my fellow Peace Corps volunteers now. Oh, it's so spicy, it's burning my mouth. Why would they do this? Babies, all of them. It was delicious, and that's on the record. So that's food. We can deal with bland food. We have ways of working with that. That rule of thumb doesn't apply to salt, however. If salt has become flavorless, it's not good for anything except for de-icing the driveway, which I admit is rather useful on a day like today. If salt has become flavorless, there's nothing you can do about it. There's nothing that can substitute that flavor on its behalf. It is good for nothing. Now, this is Mass and not a cooking show. So surely Jesus was talking about something more than cooking supplies, right? Obviously. Traditionally, salt represents purity, innocence, and wisdom. So when Jesus says, "You are the salt of the earth," he's poetically stating that you are the source of purity, innocence, and wisdom for the world. It's like the world is a big piece of plain grilled chicken. In of itself, it's kind of unappetizing. But season it with purity, innocence, and wisdom, and actually it becomes something kind of remarkable. Interesting. And dare I say, with a decent chef, a work of art. And really, when you get down to it, that's a pretty good way of describing our job. As Christians, our job is to season the world with goodness. That's not the worst way to express that. So if that can make a little bit of sense, we can take this lesson one step further. So I just said that salt represents purity, innocence, and wisdom. All three of those things are remarkably like salt in that, if they have lost their flavor, they are unfit for the kitchen. Okay? Take purity, for instance. Like salt, if you lose purity, it's gone. You can't replace purity with something else. That's actually kind of a contradiction. Here, drink this. It's pure milk. Oh, thank you. What is that? Oh, sorry, I actually ran out of milk, so I filled the rest of the glass up with apple juice. Well, then it's not pure milk anymore, is it? It's a mix of apple juice and milk, which is a terrible combination, by the way, which is why I use that as an example. The point here is purity. If it's gone, it's gone. You have it or you don't. You can't substitute for it. You can pretty much say the same thing about innocence. When you lose innocence, It's gone. For whatever reason. The reason doesn't matter. You can't get it back. You can't buy back innocence at any price. All sales are final. And that leaves us with wisdom, which I admit is a little more complicated. But again, comparing it with salt, I invite you to think of it like this. Imagine that you have an underwhelming skill. Let's say, for the sake of argument, you're not very good at saving money. That's pretty typical. I think that's fair. Well, you can season that bland skill with wisdom. Hey, it's not going to make you a master accountant overnight or anything like that, but a little bit of wisdom will help you refrain from needless spending on things that don't matter. That is not bad. In fact, that's actually a really great start to getting your finances in order. But flip it around. If you don't have the restraint to, manage your spending habits, no amount of, accounting knowledge is going to help you in that way. You can know everything there is to know about the stock market and interest rates and all of that. If anything, that's just going to help you waste money faster. Financial sensibility is like salt. You have it or you don't, and if you don't have it, there's not really a way to substitute for it. This line of thinking applies just as well to people skills. So maybe your underwhelming bland skill is you're not very good at listening to people the way a therapist listens to people. And hey, no shame in that. That is a difficult skill. And not many people acquire it naturally. Even so, if that's you, you can season that skill with the wisdom of treating other people the way you wish to be treated. Again, that will not magically make you a licensed psychiatrist overnight. People are way more complicated than that. You will still blunder. You will still say the wrong thing from time to time. But if you listen to someone the way you'd like to be listened to, that gives you a fighting chance to get through that conversation and do something good for that other person. But flip it around. If you don't care about anyone but yourself, if you genuinely are just looking out for number one, I am telling you, people pick up on that. And no amount of psychological knowledge will change that. People who come to you for compassion, they will find coldness within you. And having all the answers won't really help. Basic human decency is a kind of wisdom. And if you don't have it, there's not really a way to substitute for it. So remember, you are the salt of the earth. But what you have to give has no substitute. There is nothing else quite like it. So be sure to care for and protect that which you have, your purity, your innocence, your wisdom. Protect it, care for it, so that when the time is right, you may freely give it to those who need it the most.